everyone. Welcome to Engaging Cities Fireside Chats. I'm your host, Kelly Hickler, and today I am talking with Katie Evans. Hi, Katie.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, welcome to our show. So, Katie, you are the Senior Communications Strategist at Woodard and Curran. Did I say it right? Is
It's
it
Woodard
Curran?
Curran. Yeah, Curran.
Okay. I should have just let you introduce yourself, but that's okay. So, why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
Great. Thanks so much. And thanks again for having me. My role at Woodard and Curran really focuses on outreach and engagement for projects and programs, as well as stakeholder relations, meeting facilitation, any type of engagement work that needs to be done to make a project or a plan or a program successful. And I think, that comes from a background of having done that both on the agency side and the consulting side. I actually started out as a newspaper reporter after college and learned really quickly that that was not the role for me. So I transitioned to a role at a small agency called Desert Water Agency in Southern California, where I was able to build a communications and conservation team that is amazing. They've grown so much since I've left there, and they do amazing work. And then following that, I spent a few years at Coachella Valley Water District in Southern California as the director of communications and conservation. So it's really nice to be in this role now as a consultant because I've sat on both sides of the table. I understand what it's like to be the staff at an agency doing this work as much as I understand what it's like to be a consultant coming in fresh to do this work as well.
Oh, that's great to have those, both of those perspectives. It's really helpful.
It is, and it's been really nice for me to make this transition because as much as I loved both of those roles at Desert Water Agency and Coachella Valley Water District, I've come into a new position here where I've gotten to spread my wings a little bit into some different projects in different locations, and that's really allowed me to make a different impact. Woodard and Curran is an engineering and environmental consulting firm, and we do work all over the countries. Or, I'm sorry, all over the country. For both public and private clients, we also have an O&M arm, so that's nice because we have that tie between planning the work, designing the work, and operating the work, which we do for public agencies. We do it for industrial clients, and it gives me an opportunity to work on a really broad spectrum of things, from like water infrastructure work that we're doing to address scarcity in California to remediation work, even for sites that have been contaminated. We do flood mitigation and resilience. And then, some really complicated things that I think maybe our clients don't have a lot of experience with or struggle with, like taking regulatory notification requirements and conveying those to the public in a way that people can understand. And we're really seeing a lot of that right now with the PFAS regulations and with lead and copper, where public agencies, sometimes small public agencies that maybe don't have a communications team, need some help in telling the public about PFAS or talking to the public about lead and copper. And I really love this role because I get to kind of come in with a little bit of expertise, set them on the right path, and really watch that have a great impact on a lot of different clients.
Yeah, great. Okay,
Yeah.
I feel really ignorant right now, but what is PFAS?
Oh, PFAS is it's not a new contaminant. A new regulation has been passed for PFAS. It's a microplastic. You
Mhm.
probably have heard of it as microplastics.
Okay, all
Well,
right.
yeah, PFAS and PFOA. And the EPA passed a regulation for removal of those items from water sources, and it's creating a lot of communication need for water agencies, exactly as you just said. If people don't know about what it is, and if it's leading to large scale capital improvement projects, building new plants, that kind of stuff, it's expensive, and we do need to be talking to the public about it. So, both for health and financial
Mhm.
support. So that's a new and emerging issue that we've been spending a lot of time on.
Okay, got you. Thank you. I'm hoping I'm not the only one who didn't
You're
know.
not, I'm sure. I should have spelled it out first.
And I would like to hear more about, maybe we can come back to it, hearing more about how you adapt those. I know there's specific requirements for noticing, and how
Yeah.
you adapt it to be in a human language.
Yeah.
And then
It's a huge challenge, but something I think we're getting really good at. So, oftentimes the regulatory agencies will have really important, necessary language that they want included in all the noticing, but and you're never allowed to change it, but you
Mhm.
are allowed to add to it. And so
Okay.
some of what we've done has been like sending the regulatory notice, but also attaching another page that's like, here's a summary of what you just read. Or, having a cover letter on the notice that says, here's what we need you to know. So using our own key messaging alongside theirs has been really helpful. And we've been working with the regulatory agencies as often as possible where we're saying, okay, we're going to add this letter. We want to show it to you. Is this okay?
Mhm.
Because we want our clients, of course, to be compliant, but we also want to make sure that we're saying things that people understand in ways that they
Right.
understand.
Right, exactly. Because I think what happens sometimes is people, read something that's very technical and it seems scary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially
When
water quality stuff. Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah, like, "Oh my gosh, my drinking water is not safe," or something, and
Right.
that's not what it's actually saying, so it's really helpful to have that very simple language in the cover sheet or a follow-up summary.
And sometimes we do it with a graphic or,
Okay.
something, an illustration, something that just makes it so that people see it and they go, oh, I get this now. And that
Mhm.
also kind of helps people read it, right? Oftentimes when we send out these legal documents or these dense documents, people look at it and they're like, yeah, no thanks, too long to read.
Right.
So, if we can add a graphic or something like that to help explain it, I think that goes a long way, catching people's attention and making it more understandable.
Yeah, that's so smart. Well, Katie, did you have a specific story, a success story, if you will, that you wanted to talk about today?
Yeah, I do. It's maybe my favorite example of a project that I've done since transitioning over to consulting was a project in Situate, Massachusetts. So that town was having water quality issues, as we just talked about, and they needed a new water treatment plant. But residents in the area were afraid that the new plant would impact their properties in a negative way. They were concerned about that led to the town getting concerned about getting the public support that they were going to need for this really critical piece of drinking water infrastructure. So I was really proud to lead a stakeholder effort there. And it took about 6 months. But we were able to significantly increase public support and even support for some funding, which I think was really helpful. And I think, telling this story is a good way to kind of transition us into some of the other things I want to talk about today. But the most critical task or most important strategy here, I think, was called listening sessions, where we gave residents the mic and we tried not to debate, but instead just allowed them the time and space to share their concerns. We worked really closely with the town to make sure we all understood the specific issues that we were hearing from residents, but we genuinely wanted to hear from them to understand what their concerns were.
Mhm.
So, the key to this is you have to listen, right? Without getting defensive and without pushing back or trying to explain every single thing. And that's a hard thing to do, but it can go a long way. And in this instance, there was some misinformation out there, which I think happens, in every community, right? People get on social media in their neighborhood groups and they talk, and sometimes it happens, right? So in this instance, there was misinformation out there, and those sessions really helped us to get to the bottom of the issues and what they really were.
Mhm.
And then we could develop a really strategic communications plan to address those concerns. So I'll say this: listening sessions can be very painful, but they are a really great way to weed out rumors and ultimately gain public support. And so that's one of my favorite projects that I've done since transitioning into consulting. And it was a really great learning experience for me and a great way to gain public support.
So, how can you elaborate a bit on how to run a listening session? How to,
Yeah.
because I imagine it could quickly devolve into a yelling, complaining session. So, how do you set it up for
Okay,
success?
the first thing that I would say critical importance is when you advertise the meeting, you need to be clear what it is, right? So you don't want people coming in expecting you to give them a presentation of detailed information or you coming in and doing a Q&A with them, right? So you need to be clear in your notice posting that this is a listening session for, however formal you do it. If you want to say citizens can go on record, registering their comment, or it could be less formal, say, this is an opportunity for you to share your information, which we will then follow up with, right? You need to be explicit in advertising the meeting. Then when you start the meeting, you need to do it again. You need to say, we are here to hear from you. We will follow up with questions later, but we want to, predominantly listen to you today. And then you have to set some ground rules with yourself, right? So your own team, you have to decide in advance and be committed to not arguing, right? Or not going back and saying this and this and this. Another really important tip, I think, is depending on the size of the crowd, and you can do this in any public meeting, is saying something to the effect of, we want to respect everyone's time and we want everyone to have an opportunity to share their specific concerns. So please don't repeat things. If someone said it, we wrote it down and we are going to follow up with it. Please share your additional specific to you concerns. People are still going to do it. They're still going to repeat things, but it does kind of help it flow a little bit. But I would say, the key to a listening session is ground rules with you and your team and very upfront information with the audience on what the meeting is and what it isn't. And then you just need to kind of sit back and listen. And, I've been in listening sessions where it's just like one concern that we really needed to air out. And I've been in them where they go hours and people want to keep coming and sharing. And again, they can be painful. But what's really helpful is that you can get the rumors spotlighted, right? You can really put some sunshine on rumors and help to address them when you hear what they are, because you don't always get to hear what they are if you don't do something like this.
Okay. Do you give participants a time limit?
Well, again, depending on the size of the crowd, but yes, in general, you probably have to. If you hold a listening session, only 2 people come, you can probably let them as much time as they need. But generally, yeah, you want to respect everybody's time who showed up and gave you that opportunity.
How do you record their comments? Is someone typing it, or you?
So it depends. In a virtual setting, that helps, right? Because you can actually record the meeting and you can also just have someone taking notes. I have had listening sessions where we take the big sticky poster board and we're writing in markers and then sticking them over the walls. Those are really nice if you want to do a follow-up. So if you want to say, like, here's what we heard. If you agree with this, put a sticker. In a virtual setting, you can always say, if someone says something you agree with, add a +1 in the chat, and then people can engage that way as well. But yeah, usually we've just got a diligent, good note taker there. And again, in a virtual setting, we'll record it.
Okay. Do you have a separate facilitator and note taker?
Yes. Yeah, you definitely need someone dedicated to those 2 roles. It's way too hard to take notes and facilitate a discussion like that. But probably what's most important here is what comes after the listening session, right?
Okay.
Now that you know what everybody's concerns are, now you have the opportunity to be very strategic about your communication going forward. So if you thought everyone's mad that we're putting in this pipeline because we're going to disrupt traffic, and instead of the listening session, you heard something to the effect of, it's too much money. Now you don't really need to do the traffic discussion anymore, right? You really need to focus in on the issues that people are talking about. So what having a listening session does is it really allows you to address the things that are worrying people in a strategic way. And also by listening, taking notes and saying, we're going to follow up with you, you have time to think it through, right? So for example, let's flip that example. We thought people didn't want this pipeline because it's very expensive. But what we hear is, no, we don't want you to put that pipeline in because you're going to disrupt traffic and it's going to be terrible. So now maybe what we want to do is shift some messaging around and say, okay, we need to be very clear on the traffic control plan here instead of worrying about the finance. And oh, by the way, can we change the schedule? Could we make sure work doesn't start until the morning rush hour is over? Or if this is going in front of a school, can we do it during the summer? So you may be able to even shift the project based on what you hear in those listening sessions or what kind of feedback you get from people. The key is that you do something with what you heard, right?
Okay.
I will say this: if you hold a listening session and then never address anything everyone said, you're going to dig yourself a much deeper hole than you started out with. But if you hold a listening session, you hear what people have to say, and then you can address it with them, that's gold, right? That's the key. Listening sessions or any type of feedback from the public give you the opportunity to be strategic in your communications and even your work plan.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Yeah, that's like n number one rule number 1, don't ask for input that you can't use or you're not going to use in any
Right.
way. Don't ask for people to give you information or ask questions that you're never gonna do anything with.
Right. Wait, that's a great way to offend people, right? Waste their time, waste their energy and resources, and never use what they say. That's not going to work. So you certainly have to be prepared to use the information that you're seeking in any public comment setting.
Yeah, and do you find that that's really helpful to separate out the answering part from the listening part? Or
Yeah.
that has an advantage?
It does have an advantage in a situation where you have a lot of rumor or misinformation. So if in a different circumstance, let's try something else. Okay, you have you're raising rates. Let's say you're raising water rates, right? You know all of the information and you also know what people are worried about, right? Which is their bill. Right? In a situation like that, you probably don't need a listening session. You just need an informational meeting. And so in
Mhm.
that situation, I would probably know in advance what I was going to be talking about. I'd be ready to answer questions and I would really, really hone in. And I want to talk more about this today on impact because impact is all people care about. How does it matter to me? Why does it matter to me?
Mhm.
Otherwise, I'm not interested. We all have
Mhm.
way too many competing priorities and too
Yes.
many things going on to be worried about anything except for how does it impact me?
Yeah. Well said.
So
Mm,
that's for
the
everyone.
Yeah, because I know I'm guilty, of not going to city planning meetings in my own city, not where I work, but, like,
Where you
where
live.
I
Yeah.
live. Like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I got no way, I'm way too busy to go to a meeting in
Yeah.
my own city," and I
Yeah.
like,
I
"Oh,
can tell
that's
you that
terrible."
my own city, when my own city was building a park, I was very interested in that. I attended all the meetings virtually. I wanted to hear, and the reason for that was my son is a baseball player. I was going to spend every Saturday at that park for the foreseeable future. I wanted to know the plan. That had a direct impact on me, right?
Yes.
When they built a park across town that I'm never going to go to, I didn't go to some meetings. It just didn't impact me, and I just didn't have the time. And I think we're all guilty of that, right? We
Yeah.
all need to prioritize in our lives, and so if we want people to prioritize the things that we're talking about, we need to tell them why they should care, and that is pivotal.
Yeah. So, do you wanna expand on that now? You said you wanted to talk more about impact.
I do. And I think I'll say this, right? Every project I've ever worked on has its own unique challenges. It really depends on what the project is, what the residents are like, what the city's like, what kind of trust already exists. But if I had to really hone in on one, it's getting people to care when we need their input and when we need their buy-in, right? So we have to be doing proactive outreach along the way because we don't want the first time our customers hear from us to be because there's a problem. We want them to know about the good work we do. We want them to know about all of our efforts, everything, all the good that's going on. But they're not going to pay any attention to that unless we tell them what the impact is. We're going to have to tell them, why they should care about this good news thing. I start a lot of workshops with the same activity. Anybody who's listening to this has been in one of my workshops is going to know it. I ask people before I start speaking, think of the most recent news story you heard. Write it down, don't share it, whatever. And then I just ask, raise your hand if it was good news. And hardly anyone does, if anybody. And then I say, raise your hand if it was local. And nobody does, right? Because it's never the one. If anybody just did that exercise in their head, I can almost, it wasn't good news and it wasn't local. And so, we're competing with that at all times when we're trying to share our good news, when we're trying to build relationships with our customers and our public. The
Mhm.
only way we're going to be able to get people to pay attention is by telling them why they should care. How does this impact them? And I'm using impact there in a positive way, right? What are the benefits to you of this work that we're doing? What's the positive, the net positive to our customers? And we've got to be sharing that constantly because what we don't want to do is only come to them when we have a big, huge net negative, right?
Mhm.
We don't want to never speak to our customers ever until there's a major problem. And so it's this constant need to figure out what impact is, and I'm going to lean on my friend Simon Sinek. I wish we were friends. I just read his books a lot. And say, start with why, right? You have to figure out why. Why are you doing this project in the first place? Ask yourself that. Then dig deeper. Why does that matter to your board of directors? Why does it matter to the people who vote for them? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? So you
Mhm.
really get down to the bottom of it. And if it's like this project is going to make sure that we have clean water for 50 generations, that's your message. It's got to be the impact. If you're building a park and the reason that you're building the park is to improve recreation in your city because your city has grown tremendously and you want kids to have a place to play, you've got to start with that, right? You don't need to start with master planning or regulations or proposition whatever funding. You got to start with why. You have to start with the impact, and that's important to customers. As you're doing that, though, then they start to buy in, right? Oh, yes, my city's doing great work. Look how they're building this park, or look how they're adjusting traffic, or look how they're doing, any number of things. Look how they're building a new pipeline to make sure we have water quality, high quality water. Start with impact. Tell people something that matters. You have to deliver that first. And if you're working on a project, you've got to tell them why you're doing it. Once you get that going, it's a lot easier to share the other messaging that you want people to pay attention to. Think of
Mhm.
that impact as your hook. Once you've got that hook, you can tell them all the other things that you need them to know. You can share all the benefits of the project. You can share what you need from them to support it. You can get them there, but you've got to start with how it matters to them. We all have, right? We have jobs and families and kids, and we're worried about health, and we're worried about recreation. We got to get our kids to sports, and we have to do homework and a million other things. How can we possibly prioritize something that we don't even know how it matters, right? So we've got to start with impact. That's got to be the key.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I am embarrassed to say I'm guilty myself of sometimes using messaging that's like, oh, Senate bill, blah, 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 requires that we do this. And
Yeah.
what a terrible way to start
Well, you're not
communication.
alone in having done that before. Certainly, these are lessons learned along the way, right? But we do need to really think about that, right? It's got to be an impact message, and it's got to relate. Um, and one of the things that I've done a lot in some of my big projects is research based outreach. So I'll work with a polling company, and we'll do a survey of the community, and we'll ask questions. If I'm doing a water project, we'll ask questions that say, what are the most important issues in your community? And if we find out that they say public safety, environment, schools, and water's number 20, right? Then I know I have a whole lot more work to do to explain why this water project matters. If I'm working in an area that's suffering from flooding or drought or something else, water's probably high on the list. And that tells me that I can probably come up with an impact message that's a little lighter because they're already thinking about it. So I
Okay.
think that's really important, right? You need to know who your community is a little bit. And if you work in your community, you probably do have some sense of what things people are talking about, what things people are concerned about. And you can really bring in that impact message that way. It is easy to just say, we're building this pipeline, or we're doing this new thing, or this Senate bill says we have to, when that no one cares, right? In fact, I will tell you from public research, I'm not a pollster. I'm probably going to say this wrong, but most of the polls I've done, I'd venture to say every poll I've ever been involved in, when we talk about regulations, we lose people immediately. That is the last thing they care about, even if the regulation is driving everything, right? So even if the regulation is the absolute only reason we're doing something, if we say X regulation says we have to do this, we lose them immediately.
Yeah, their eyes just immediately.
Right. But if we can tell them why that regulation exists instead. So, again, I'll use another water example, right? We're building this treatment plant to meet a new water quality regulation. No one cares, right? But if it's our mission is to deliver clean, safe drinking water to you and your family, so we're building this, that's a totally different message, right? So
Yes.
even if the real reason, starts from a regulation or some other, purpose like that, we've got to relate it to people. We've got to share the impact with them.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if it has to do with like I don't have a communications background. I have city planning background, and then you work with a lot of engineers who have engineering background that we kind of think in different terms. So, maybe it's not best to have the technical people drafting the communication messages.
Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna some of them are very good at it, but I will say there are people at our firm who call me the translator because my job is to take some of that technical stuff and make it public facing, right? And just kind of take that important I mean, look, I work with so many incredibly smart people. I mean, they are brilliant. They do incredible work. But, sometimes I've got to get them to say, tell me that like 10 levels down for so I can try to figure out how I can convey to the public, you can convey that. It is, I mean, of course, I'm going to say this. There's a huge benefit to getting a communications professional involved in your organization. And I fully understand that not everybody can hire a full-time communications person. That doesn't make sense for a lot of cities and
Sure.
agencies, but there's a lot of consultants out there. I mean, there are PR firms that only work with public agencies, and then you have consulting firms like water and engineering and environmental firms that have communication staff like me on.
Mhm.
So if you're working with a firm like Woodard and Curran to, design a pipeline, you can also have me as part of that team to work through the communications part of it. And I think there's a lot of value there.
Okay, so Katie's
Of course I do.
available, everyone.
Shameless plug.
Yeah. Are there any challenges that you can think of that you've come across time and time again, and what are some strategies for dealing with those?
Yeah. So, I think one of the things that just never seems to not be a challenge is to get people to required public meetings.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have public meetings because people really care. And sometimes we have public meetings because, we have something to share with them or an activity to do. But getting people to come to our public meetings is hard, especially if we're not telling them why and what the impact is. So I think, we're really seeing a transition there, and I'm really excited about it. So, pre-COVID, we had a hard time getting people to come to meeting places. Post-COVID, it's nearly impossible, right? When everybody's got experience with Zoom and Teams and everything else, they want to see a virtual option. They don't want to come. And if you think about it, you're home with your kids, you're doing homework, you're making dinner, you've got a million things going on. You don't want to drag your family to City Hall, right? And I'll say this, I when we have meetings like that, we provide childcare, we set up kids activities, we do everything we can to try to make it easy for people to come. But at the end of the day, it's still much easier for people if they can sit at their computer, you know, while their kid's next to them doing their homework, as opposed to trying to drag them down to City Hall.
Mhm.
That being said, there are some activities that just really work best in person, and we're working through that. There's so many great online engagement platforms now that allow you to do workshop facilitation and meetings online. I mentioned to you earlier that we use Conveo. We're using Conveo right now, and it's a great way to do online discussion boards and post documents that people can comment right on, and have maps that people can put a pin in their house and say, this is too close to me, or whatever it is that they want to do. So I think we're really seeing an interesting transition and moving away from some of the public meeting as the sort of be all end all, public outreach platform to some new things. I don't think we're going to get rid of public meetings. I think there's still a lot of value in having them. But I think if you're going to have a public meeting, you really need to think about how to do it well and how to get people engaged. Have a childcare room. If you're a city, you probably have a Parks and Recs department, and you can hire your, Parks and Recs aides to come to your meeting and do coloring books or something. Have food at your meeting, have a translator if you need it. Those things really are welcoming to people. The other thing is, of course, impact. I know I'm a broken record right now, but I'll use an example. We were doing a project around a park. It's at a park, and it's going to impact everybody who lives nearby. And so we went door to door, knocked on people's doors, and gave them a flyer and said, we're going to have a meeting to talk about this. We're going to make it as convenient as possible for you to attend. We're going to come to your neighborhood. We're not going to have it at City Hall. We're going to come here and have this.
Mhm.
And that's the way to get people there. I think getting people engaged is always going to be a challenge. So having the impact message first and then making it as convenient as possible are the only real ways we're going to continue to keep people engaged.
Yeah, I love that idea of using your Parks and Rec people.
Mhm.
And I'm laughing because, last night I was just I've been rewatching Parks and Rec,
My
and
favorite.
last night's episode was where Leslie had a dinner party to impress her new boyfriend, Justin, and she invited all these Parks and Rec people, like, she invited someone to come help clean her house and invited
Mhm.
someone to help
Yes.
cook dinner and invited someone to be a bartender, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
But I mean,
I
right?
love it.
You probably have, if you're a city and with the Parks and Recs department, you probably have, I could be misspeaking here, but I think a lot of them have teenagers, right? Who run
Yes,
kids programs in the summer. Can one of those teenagers come sit at your coloring book table during your public meeting?
mhm,
Of course you want to make it where the parents can see them and everything's
yeah.
safe. But yeah, I mean, that's something that you can probably pull off. And if not, can you hire a babysitter on care.com for $20 an hour?
Oh, yeah.
You know? So I think there's some just, thinking about what's stopping people from participating and trying to make it as convenient as possible can go a really long way.
Mhm. Yeah, I would go to way more meetings if there was food, if there
Yeah.
was, like, something other than cold pizza too, like,
Mhm, mhm.
good
Yeah,
food.
we had some, I did an event where we wanted the public to come out and kinda do it was sort of like a touch a truck event, and we had taco trucks, right? Who is not gonna show up for a taco truck? I am
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah, I don't even
So
care what the meeting's about.
right? So, yeah, there's great ways to entice people, but it is a challenge. We understand people, especially if you're not offering those things. If you just want somebody to show up at your 6 o'clock meeting in the evening at City Hall, it's just too hard. It's too hard.
Mhm.
And so, things you can do to help people make it easy to participate. Those things go a long way.
Yes.
Mhm.
Um, are there any key takeaways that you can share with us about just in general about working with the community?
Yeah, I think, I've said impact so many times that I'm not going to say it again.
It's okay.
But
You could say it. You're allowed to say it 2 more times.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think, so my title is Senior Communications Strategist, right? It's not public outreach person. It's not meeting facilitator. It's strategist. So if I could give listeners one really good tip, it's to be strategic about outreach. Whenever we do an outreach project on a job, we always start with what I call a strategic communications plan or strategic outreach and engagement plan. And everybody immediately is like, oh no, not another plan. We're already doing, plans. I'm not talking about a massive, huge document. I'm talking about like 5 to 10 pages where you're really thinking through how are we going to do outreach. There's some very important keys to this. First, you need to know who you're talking to. Identify your audiences, understand who they are and how you're going to talk to them. Figure out what you're going to say. Figure out how you're going to say it. What platforms are you going to be using? Figure out when you're going to say it. So tying your communications along with the project milestones or the plan events, whatever it is that's going on in your project, and then tell them why. So, it's cliche to say who, what, when, where, why, and how, but that's really what I'm talking about. Make a plan that tells you who, what, when, where, why, and how are you going to do outreach. It should only take maybe an hour or two to write this plan up, maybe more, but think it through. Give yourself the opportunity to really understand and be strategic about your outreach so you're not wasting your resources. You don't get a lot of bites at the apple here. People are getting messages thrown at them all day long from every single platform they're on. Make sure you're using your little bit of attention wisely. And the best way to do that is to be strategic. Develop a plan, have somebody help you develop a plan, but know what you're going to do related to outreach before you just start talking.
Mhm. Do you have a template plan that you could share or
a template plan, but
Yeah.
certainly certainly there are outreach plan templates out there. I'm
Mhm.
quite certain that if you just Googled it, you would find some.
Mm.
We write ours really specific to the agency and the project
I
when we're
see.
making those plans, but
Mm.
I bet you could find a pretty good framework just looking online.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'll poke around too, because I bet our listeners would be really interested. I mean, even though it's so simple, the who, what, when, where, why, how, sometimes it's easier to start when you have
Yeah.
something to fill out.
Yes, definitely. And I think there's definitely going to be stuff like that out there.
Okay, I will take it upon myself to do some research
I'm
and
happy to help. Happy to help you look good.
try to find something. We are working on adding a resources
Oh,
page to the Engaging Cities website.
great.
So, I'll
That's the perfect
see
thing
what I
to
can
add to.
find and add it on there.
Yeah.
Are there any other words of advice that you would like to share with our listeners?
I saved it since I could only say it twice more.
Okay.
Wanted to close with it. Start with why, right? Tell us what your impact is. That is going to be key to your success in any type of outreach platform, any type of outreach message. You've got to start with impact. Get them hooked. Tell them why it matters to them.
Okay. Awesome. I love it. Short and sweet. That's like a tweetable, or
Yeah.
is it an
Sound bite.
exable? An exable? No, that doesn't sound.
I don't
No.
know.
All right. So Katie, thank you so much for joining our fireside chats today. It
Yes.
was lovely getting to know you and getting so much great advice. It's helpful to me personally. Hopefully I'm sure it's helpful to our listeners as well. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. So this was great.
Great. And where can everyone find you if they wanted to follow you or reach out to you?
I am extremely active on LinkedIn. So very easy to find there. If you go to LinkedIn/in, it's Katie Evans WC. You could definitely find me there. I post constantly. I'm easy to reach. You can also email me anytime at kevans@woodardcurran.com, and I'll give you that so you can post it in the resources. But yeah, I'm available to chat. Happy to hear if any listeners have follow-up questions. And certainly LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me if anybody wants to do so.
Okay, great. Well, with that, we'll end this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in and make sure to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you on the next one.